Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. I'm finally catching up on some long overdue Marvel Legends reviews, and today I'm going to start with one of the big ones from 2024, which was the oversized Hulkbuster. Now last year we got a pretty cool Iron Man retro card wave, and I reviewed every figure in that line and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. The one thing that line didn't have was a Build-A-Figure, and yet a few months later we get this Hulkbuster, which is kind of interesting to me because this would have made a fantastic Build-A-Figure, but hey, they released this on its own as a deluxe version. I'm all for that. That means you don't have to buy every figure in a wave if you don't want it, and I think this is absolutely glorious, and I must say at this price point I think it's worth every penny. But before we get into all that, let's start off by taking a look at the packaging. Now, this is the more recent packaging that we saw adopted last year. This is kind of celebrating 85 years of Marvel. It's kind of nondescript, really. It's a lot of black borders. I'm not a huge fan of that. But we have this window display, and of course, we can see the figure in all its glory here. So this is imminently displayable just because we see the figure, which looks pretty cool. If we look at the side panel, though, we have this fantastic artwork provided by Adi Granov. I absolutely love this artwork, and I think it looks brilliant. This is a fantastic way to display this packaging if you want to put it on its shelf on its side profile. You can stack these up against a number of other Marvel Legends figures and they're going to look pretty colourful and presentable. When we flip the packaging over to look at the reverse, we see the same image but this time writ large and looks absolutely fantastic, and then we have a little bit of bio on the side there. So again, this is very displayable in its own right and looks pretty cool on display. Now the first thing you'll notice about this oversized figure is just how tall and meaty it is, and it's quite weighty as well. The other thing is that in the packaging it actually comes without some of the outer armor pieces, so for the most part of this review I'm going to focus on this until we add those armor pieces a little bit later on. And part of my reasoning for that is to show off some of the detail that's actually underneath the armor, which I think is very cool, because as you can see here, it's a fairly intricate design which has been neatly sculpted into the figure itself, which I think looks really cool. Plus on top of that we see some really nice paint apps as well. We see a lot of silver and gold, and I think that's a lot of lovely little detail for something that's going to be covered up later by thicker armor. So I think the idea is that you can display this in two ways. You can have the slimmed down version or you can have the bulkier version, as we'll see a bit later. But either way, that's a very cool touch and the first time we've seen that on any Hulkbuster figure. Sadly, whilst there's no paint washes running over this figure, a pretty consistent theme that we're seeing in Marvel Legends these days and other toy companies such as McFarlane Toys, what we do see though are some really nice paint apps, particularly the gold that we see on this figure and the silvers. They really jump out. There's a slight metallic quality to them and they look really luxurious, and I think they've done a very nice job of that. Plus, they're using a range of different plastics as well, which are molded in different colors. We have red and we have these metallic golds, which I think works very, very well. So it actually makes the figure look quite colorful and textured in its own right. And where we do see a little bit of a paint wash is actually on the silver pieces, where we see some of the pneumatic wiring and bits and pieces there, particularly around the hips and on the back of the arms and the back of the legs, which I think looks really very cool and just draws out the detail a little bit more. The other thing I should note, of course, is that this is pretty much a brand new figure. We've had several Hulkbusters in the past, including movie versions, but there's nothing really similar about those previous versions with this figure. This seems to be entirely new sculpt, which, you know, they get top marks for that. It's really nice to have something new and distinct and unique in the collection. Moving on to the articulation, we have a straight swivel at the top of the neck there, allowing the head to rotate all the way around, but there is no ball joint here to allow it to wobble side to side, unfortunately. Now, thankfully, those shoulder pads will lift up to accommodate the ball joint in the shoulders, and that arm will lift up and out. It's a big chunky joint, so it's a little bit stiff, but it works very, very well. Obviously, that lifts up and out. There is a bicep swivel, which is great, and we have the single joint at the elbow, allowing that lower forearm to bend to roughly 90 degrees. And then we have a joint at the wrist that allows that hand to rotate from side to side, not quite all the way around, but certainly from side to side, and it'll also hinge forwards and backwards a little bit as well. We then have 2 points of articulation in the torso. At the very top in the chest, we have this rather unusual ball joint that allows the figure to move from side to side and lean left and right, but it kind of requires you to ratchet it into place almost, and if it's not locked into one of those places, it kind of snaps back to its previous position, which is a little bit funky, not quite how I'd like this to perform in all honesty. But nevertheless you can get a good range of motion out of this. And whilst he doesn't bend forward particularly far, he does go back a good distance, which is surprising for a figure of this size and girth. Now he's got a straight swivel at the waist as well, as if that wasn't enough, so you can get plenty of motion out of these two joints to put him in lots of very cool different crouching positions, etc., which is great. He's got a ball joint in the hips and the legs will kick out to the side. You'll also notice there is a swivel at the top of the leg there as well, which is very cool. And the leg will kick forwards a pretty healthy distance given the size of the figure, and it will also go back a tiny amount as well. There's another single joint at the knee mirroring what we see at the elbow there, and that lower leg can bend to about 90 degrees. And then we have an ankle pivot where the foot can rock from side to side, so it will arch there, as you can see, and it'll also hinge forwards and backwards a little bit as well, which is nice to see. In terms of accessories, he's fairly limited, but he does come, of course, with his outer armor casing, which looks pretty cool. We'll see that displayed in a moment. He also has these two sort of funnel exhaust bits that go on the back. We'll see what they look like in a moment. He has an additional pair of hands, so he has two closed fists, and we also have this alternate Tony Stark head. Snapping the armor pieces is fairly easy. You just take the front chest piece, just slide that in there. There's some peg holes for it to slide into, and then you take the reverse at the back of the armor, and that also just slides into the back there and connects with the front armor piece, and it makes a nice tight fit, which looks pretty cool. And then you instantly add those exhaust pipes as well to the back of the figure, and you have a pretty bulked up Hulkbuster, which looks ready for action. I have to say, is pretty impressive. I think this looks absolutely fantastic, and I love just the way this is presented. And then, of course, we also have the option of removing the head and putting on our Tony Stark head as well, which looks pretty cool. Obviously, he looks dwarfed in this giant casing exactly as he should do. And I think this looks pretty cool. I think this is a good sculpt. I think this is actually a brand new sculpt. Of course it is, which is pretty nice considering we had a lot of Tony Starks over the years. So this is really cool and very much appreciated. And before we wrap up for today, I did want to show him off as a comparison against his predecessors. So we can see on the right-hand side here, the very first Hulkbuster figure in the Marvel Legends line. This is from Toy Biz many years ago. I have a lot of love for this figure, I have to say, and I still think it stands up after all these years, but obviously a very different approach that they've taken here. Two very distinct looks, two very distinct styles that they're going for, but what we can all agree on is that this new Hulkbuster clearly towers above that previous release, making this very much more oversized. And here is the MCU Marvel Legends Hulkbuster. As I said before, obviously a brand new sculpt here, so we can see that these are distinctly very different. Again, I can say that this new Hulkbuster is a lot taller, much bigger than that previous release, and as you can see, they're just obviously completely different in terms of their approach and look and design and feel. And then finally, just for good measure, I'm also comparing him here against the Marvel Select Hulkbuster, which was a cool figure, but a little bit of a disappointment if I'm entirely honest. Now, this is meant to be the same design, obviously still based on the Adi Granov version. I can't say which one's more accurate, but there are little subtle differences. I do prefer the paint on the Marvel Select. It has a lot more of that metallic feel, but I think on balance overall, I way prefer this new Marvel Legends version. It has a lot more articulation, it looks a lot more authentic to me, and there's just so much more you can do with it. So this is much stronger in my opinion. Okay, and then finally, here he is standing next to a Hulk. Admittedly, it is a slightly smaller Hulk in that it's Joe Fixit, but you can see that obviously this Hulkbuster would give him a good run for his money because he's significantly taller. Likewise, he's also taller than the recent Odin release, which I'll also get around to covering at some point soon. And just for fun, here he is standing next to Robocop, which is a NECA figure. He's 7 inches tall, and you can see that obviously this Hulkbuster stands a good 9 inches, maybe 10 inches tall. It really towers above him, which is pretty cool. Final thoughts from me, perhaps unsurprisingly, I'm going to give this figure 5 stars because I'm so super impressed with it. Now, I must be honest and say that I wasn't actually expecting an awful lot from this figure. I very nearly passed because I do have all those other previous Hulkbusters, and really how many do you need? But I've got to be honest, I'm so glad that I got this guy because for me, he's actually the definitive version. I don't think there's a better Hulkbuster on the market or ever has been. I think this is the one to be the benchmark against all others. I think he's absolutely fantastic. I have some very minor gripes, but not enough to knock off a star. I think they really nailed this, and this is supreme quality. So well done, Hasbro. Well done, Marvel Legends. This is a fantastic addition to the collection. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do consider giving the video a like. That kind of thing really does help the channel out, and it allows me to keep making more content. And if you're interested in seeing more content, remember to hit subscribe, as there'll be plenty more videos coming soon.